Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Film Project. This is session number 16 of season 5, and I'm here. I'm introducing things here today because unfortunately we've had a change. Trish Lambert, the Tolkien Maven, who normally joins us, has been joining me in this for many years now, has unfortunately had to step down. She has so many things going on right now and is not able to continue with us. So she is sends her best regards, and of course, she will always be. She's not abandoning the project entirely and will still be in touch at times, but it's not going to be able to make it to regular broadcasts. So we will be missing Trish's presence here in the short term at least. So hence my not nearly so adequate introduction here to start off. And Dave, I hope Dave will be able to make it back here this evening, but I'm not sure. Things, as Nick fully understands, bedtimes being somewhat unpredictable at times. So we're going to go ahead and begin here today. We're gonna, I'm sort of shifting the focus a little bit tonight. I think we said last time we were going to talk about the frame last time, and I still will do that. That will happen. I will talk about the frame tonight, but we're not going to spend much of the time about the frame tonight because I want to make sure that there's some odds and ends that we need to finish up from last time that I didn't want to just rush through. And in particular, the Dagor Bragollach. This is the big 2-episode set piece at the end of the season that we really need to make sure that we have really clear ideas about. This is going to be an important thing, not just for the like the sort of, the plot arcs and everything, but this is where the whole story culminates, right? And we need to really make sure that we're working through all of the different combinations of this and making sure that the Dagor Bragollach, as we're scripting it, is something that's really going to be a fit culmination to the storylines that we've been developing during the season. So this seems worth taking a little bit of time over. So I'm going to spend a lot of our time on the Dagor Bragollach tonight, and then hopefully we'll polish up other odds and ends, and then we'll get to we will talk about the frame and set up a fuller discussion of the frame next time, is I think how we're going to handle that. So that's the plan. And let us jump straight into things here. Here's just we've got a revision of our season outline here. This wasn't mapped onto episode numbers last time, right? This is a very similar flow chart, but I don't remember the numbers being along the bottom, so that's pretty cool. So let's just do a brief glimpse at this here going through. So we've got episode 1. Arethel and Gondolin and Beor meeting Finrod, right? Beor and Finrod is the main story. Then episode 2, Arethel, and Nick, feel free to sort of elaborate or comment on things as we go here. Arethel, the primary protagonist of episode 2, right? That's where she does her primary journey. Her sketchy romance with Eol happens in episode 3, as does the death of Beor. So that's where we really get to we get to talk about Arethel's marriage and also death in the same episode, which seems good. That's a good combination.
Super appropriate.
Absolutely. Yeah. Then we've got the birth of Maiglin coming in at the same time as the Stockade battle, and Sauron beginning to do his thing with the captives, doing his spell of really significant quantity of dread, that he is not quite bottomless, but you get a few free refills of the dread, but it's not completely bottomless. Anyway, so we got him doing that there in episode 4. Episode 5, that's the unfriendship of the Green Elves episode, with the arrival of the folk that shall soon be the House of Hodor into Beleriand, and we've got
Is there a way to say that, like the artist formerly known as Prince?
Sort of, or yeah, the people soon to be, who,
I guess.
the people of Hodor. And then Aradel, things getting worse for Aradel there, and her being confined to Nan Elmoth. And Haleth, right? Haleth is also beginning there in episode 5 as well. So we've got the unfriendship on the one hand, and the forging ahead of the Haladin on the other hand. Episode 6, the escape, Rogren and Anail escaping, Hador helping out there. So Hador will have been brought over into the northwest by that time, and we've got Haleth killing Tevildo there in episode 6 as well. Episode 7. The Council of Estelad, and of course the impersonation of Amlach by Sauron. And then episode 8, Andreth moving the House of Beor to Ladros from Nargothrond, and Eowyn Maegwyn visiting the dwarves. So we get some more, both some Eowyn Maegwyn thing. I'm really glad that we're doing that we're getting Eowyn Maegwyn together there in an episode. I mean, it's good to have a lot of the focus on Aradel herself through that whole plot thread, I think, in the season. But I do think that Eowyn Maegwyn connection is a really important one, and we get the dwarves in there too, so that's good. And then maybe from that, a dwarf story can kind of spin off into episode 9, and then Andreth and Aegnor's love relationship there, along with Thorin Gwethil. Yeah. Oh, yeah, look at that. Not all my broadcasts are happening. That's fun.
Good times.
I hate it when I hit a button and it just, I miss it or something. Like, I totally hit that button.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been having a little fun not sending audio out to Twitch.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Weeks,
that's a fun challenge right there.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah, that one's good. Anyway, sorry. So as I was saying, so we've got the Dracula moment there in episode 9. Episode 10, Fingolfin sort of receives his warning, right, and is getting ready for his big push. Barahir takes the lead of the House of Beor. We've got the double wedding and the return to Gondolin in episode 10. So the big tragic culmination of the Maegwyn, the Aradel story in any case. Then we get episode 11, setting up for the Dagor Bragollach. We've got the Athrobeth, Finrod and Andreth, and we've got Fingolfin's big push to do something. Then the Dagor Bragollach hits, Wall of Flame, episode 12, and the duel with Morgoth, and through episode 13, and the duel with Morgoth in 13. So I think this is great. I'm really happy with the way that this has come out. I mean, we've been through this several times, and I think that there's a lot of stuff that we're trying to balance in this season. This is really challenging from timeline perspectives. And now I know that there was another timeline question, which I think we can address. So one of the issues was there's going to be one place in the season where we have to skip some time, right? We've got to skip like 30 years. And the question was, where exactly did we want to introduce that skipping? And I think from everything that I've seen, what seemed to me to make the most sense was what you guys called option 1, that is to do the skip between episode 9 and 10. I really, first of all, I really agree. I think that the skip should happen between episodes. I think that's certainly what I think makes most sense. Is most natural.
It makes it much easier to make sure that there's no events that appear to be happening concurrently that can't be happening concurrently because their time is moving faster in one part of the plot than another. So it helps avoid that whole issue.
Right. And there's something, I mean, one of the concepts of an episode, right, is that like the episode is a story on its, like the episode should be a unified story on its own. And if there's a gap in the middle of it, that's not that can't work, but it sort of implies that it has to be a story which, accommodates the 30 years later, in the middle of the episode. And that, it's not every story works that way. Yeah. It's tricky. It's tricky.
I mean, season 2 was full of stuff like that, but
Well, that's
Elvish
different.
perspective
Yeah,
doesn't
exactly.
it doesn't really look like it.
No,
You know,
no, exactly. And what we didn't have in season 2 is what we will now, which is, starting an episode with Andreth being 30 and ending it with her being 60, right? I mean, that's what we did not have in season 2, right? That's one of the things you get out of with the Elvish perspective. So, yeah.
if we were going to do something like that, it would be like if we had decided to have a real Mayfly experience with Beor and just show the progression of his life over the course of an episode.
Right.
That would have been the only time to kind of do something like that. And because we want to spend more time with him, that's not the way that's going to go down.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it does open up the really awesome comic possibility of like a bromance montage between Finrod and Beor, but like every time he's older and more decrepit, so, that'd be hilarious. But no, I agree. I mean, it is kind of a fun idea to sort of show the aging of Beor essentially from the Elvish perspective, right? To sort of shoot it from the Elvish perspective, as it were. And it's like every time you turn around, like Finrod goes back into the room and is like, oh, another thing. And he's like, 10 years older. Yeah, that'd be great. I love it, but no, we shouldn't do that. So that's fine. So I like, and the wedding itself, right? Both the wedding, the return to Gondolin, the advent of Fingolfin's warning, like all the things that are happening there are all things that it feels to me would be very comfortable to happen after a gap, right? And also I kind of would like to have the initial story of Andreth and Aegnor's relationship, right? The romance between Andreth and Aegnor. I'd like to have that story sort of finished, because it's not like it's just hanging on, right? It ends. Like there is an ending to that when Aegnor says, yeah, I can't. Now, it's not totally over as far as Andreth is concerned, right? She still doesn't get it. She's still bitter about it many years later, but still, it's kind of, it's still kind of, it has its own arc and is finished at a very definite point. And so I think doing that in one episode, and then having time pass, I think that helps, and having the time pass right after that makes a lot of sense, right? Because then when we come back to Andreth and see Andreth, as we will with Barahir and with the double wedding, Andreth will be around. So to show now Andreth older and also more bitter, right? As a result of that, that seems to me to kind of flow together pretty well. So yeah. And it is a thing that we've done. I mean, we did a big sort of passage of time like that. I mean, it was much bigger, of course, in terms of years, but we did a big passage of time like that back in season 2 with the second generation of elves coming in, and when we set up for the trial of Melkor in the middle of that season.
Even in their first episode, Celeborn essentially grows up over the course of that episode.
Right.
He's a teenager when it first opens up, and then when we get to the end of it, he's a fully grown adult.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's not like we haven't done that before. So
right.
We kind of have an idea of how that goes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Good. Hey, so Nick, it's occurring to me that I totally didn't introduce you at the beginning. Like here, I'm just like assuming everybody knows you because you've been part of this project, but why don't I officially introduce you? Nick Palazzo is joining me here today at the mic and on camera because, as I said before, he's, Nick, of course, has been one of the core members of our script team for some time. And so he's been doing a lot of work on this stuff, and particularly on the Dagor Bragollach, which is why I am availing myself of his expertise on that material here this evening. So thank you, Nick, and apologies for the belated introduction there. Okay, so I think that's all fine. Now, did we? What is the consensus among the script team about the Wall of Flame? Does the Wall of Flame happen in the beginning of episode 12 or the end of episode 11? Do you guys have strong feelings about that?
So what we've been this, and there's a few reasons for this. What at least Miri and I have become pretty clear about. I'm not entirely certain where everybody else involved lands on it, but I legitimately just don't remember every point of view on this.
Right.
But having the wall of flame appear at the end of episode 11 allows us to skip from the point where the wall of flame first appears to the point where it's at Dorthonia, because a little bit of calculation kind of tells you that if you show it on screen in anything resembling a reasonable speed, it's going to appear to be more of the battle of slow and creeping flame rather than the battle of sudden flame.
Right.
So being able to kind of skip that part of it, which in reality could happen over the course of a few hours.
Right.
But even that is going to, like, you're going to see like lava slowly moving across the plains. It's not quite
right. Because you're right. I mean, it's even if we imagine quite a high speed, like, even if the flame is advancing faster than a horse can gallop, it's going to take, from the time when they're like, what's that orange glow on the horizon, to we're on fire is going to be still a fair bit of time. And so you're right. If we capture that, that makes a lot of sense. And it also, it just kind of seems to me as a sort of transition, a very logical kind of punctuation at the end of episode 11, right? For the, and especially I like emphasizing, Nick, the suddenness. Again, not only the physical suddenness of it, but that essentially Fingolfin's big push is essentially interrupted by Morgoth's attack, I think is something that we really want to convey. Whereas if we comfortably close episode 11, the Athrobeth has happened, and Finrod and Andreth are like, okay, well, not good talk, see you again later maybe, and Fingolfin like making arguments and stuff and coming to some kinds of conclusion or other, and then next episode we begin with the fire. It's not clear how much time has passed. It's that sense of interruption, I think, is going to be important. We really need to have the holy crap, Morgoth is attacking. We didn't expect this. And oh my goodness, this is like an attack like we've never seen before. The whole world is on fire like that, so that realization coming in at the end of episode 11 makes a lot of sense to me.
Right. And we're going to be tying up a lot of plot towards the end of episode 11 to start with. Right. So it's kind of going to feel like, okay, is the season over, or what we need to signal to the audience that there's more coming. Right.
Right. No, and we can show, if there's some time that Maria suggested might be some time that needs to pass in there still, but that's still fine.
It's happening at the end of an episode, so that's perfectly normal to do that sort of thing.
Right. Exactly. And it still gives us a chance, Rhiannon, as you were suggesting, absolutely, we can kind of rewind. If I would think, and Nick, I don't know what you're thinking, but I would think that what we would want, again, it's the idea of suddenness, right? It's like the sudden terror, the, oh my goodness, look at what's happening. Holy cow, what's that? Kind of, that's what we want to capture at the end, right? That's what we want to convay. Right. And I think we can do that fairly efficiently at the end. We don't have to show a lot of action on the screen to do that. Even just, like people seeing the glow in the distance and wondering what it is, and people looking out, and then like we just show, like we can kind of zoom in on, I'm imagining the final shot of that episode being like, we kind of come in and we see, and we see the flame advancing, and you just see glaurung, right? Glaurung just kind of like goes into this, into the screen and, disappears in a burst of flame, kind of thing. So that we know, what's happening, and it's a, you know, sort of a cliffhanger for next time, and then boom. So Rhiannon, yeah, the kinds of shots that you're thinking of, Rhiannon, of like Ard Gallen being systematically burned and destroyed, very easy for us to kind of come at the onset of the battle from multiple angles at the beginning of episode 12 to really sort of establish that, having established the terror of the sudden onset at the end.
Well, to me, the Men of Hithmel will probably be the best. The guys who are basically parked on Ard Gallen when this happens, those are going to be our best candidates to kind of show the impact of that.
Right.
Plus whatever exhausted messenger reaches my rose.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and they're going to be able to see it. I mean, from Himring, they would, you're going
to be able to see a lot.
They're going to be able to see, I mean, they will know that something is happening for sure, even though it's happening far away. But of course, I don't have to tell a lot of our viewers what enormous fires spreading over large distances, look like, and the kind of atmospheric effects that they can have for many, 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 many miles away. It's something I know that many of our listeners have all too much experience with at this point in 2020. So yeah, I mean, it'll definitely be apparent from Himring even. But okay, good. Yeah, no, I think that's I think makes the most sense to me too. I do want to make sure that we convey the suddenness of that, and having some sense of its breaking in again, even if we are having time passing, just in the course of the narrative, it kind of almost sort of interrupting at the end. Anyway, okay, cool. Good. So let's go. So this is a review of the episode. Any major changes made in this? I think we were looking at these, and I think these are still more or less the same. So review of what we spent a lot of our time talking about last time, the episodes, the plots of the episodes.
Well, definitely everything that that's there for episodes 1 and 2 is still pretty much that way. Oh, actually, there are some changes that Marie has made to reflect our conversations, actually, particularly in episode 2 there, I noticed. Okay,
let's see. So we've got meeting ale, right? We talked about when the timing of that is. That I agree with. That seems to me important, that the first glimpse
that was a tough nut to crack. I'm here to tell you, I can't wait to talk about it.
Yeah. No, that'll be good. I look forward to that. Fingolfin, that's new. Isn't that new? Fingolfin visiting men? I don't remember talking about that last time.
So we can get into the specifics when we actually talk about the episode.
Yeah.
But so basically in that episode, Fingolfin was to be kind of a C-plot, expressing pride in the siege, which turned out to not be that big of a story in and of itself. So we managed to in order to give screen time to both that and life in Nargothrond for the House of Beor, we wound up kind of combining those two plot lines.
Right. Oh, right. And this is the replacement for. So we've kept Beor away from the seaside. Right. I see. Is the other thing that we've done here. Okay. Right. Yeah, that I do remember, of course. Okay. Yep. Good. Well, one thing that's really useful about having that as a B plot in episode 2, episode 1 is not going to feature much of the sort of larger Fingolfin plot. That is like the larger state of things in the siege of Angband, right? Aradhel's going to be talking and thinking about it, but she doesn't know anything, right? So we're not going to get any kind of an update as to what things are doing or what, all we're going to get from Aradhel is that she doesn't know what's going on and what other people are planning and how to coordinate with them, right? So, so we're not going to get that there. We get Finrod, of course, in the A plot, but his focus is going to be on Beor. It'll come up some, but it's not going to. So bringing Fingolfin in and helping to orient everybody to basically the picture of where things are with the elves, I think is a really good idea, especially since, again, as we look ahead, we're not going to be really focused on that for a lot of the time. I mean, it's, we're going to get some with the Fingon and Hador subplot, right? Which is going to kind of culminate there with the rescue, in episode 6, with the escape. But it's not going to be, and it's not really going to be until the latter part of the season when Fingolfin, has his premonition and makes his push. It's not really going to be until then that really the elf plot, the larger elf plot, Elf and Morgoth plot, really kind of takes center stage in any way. So having a kind of refresher course in the status of that I mean, I know that, exposition in order to remind everybody what's happening is not a great B plot all by itself, but accomplishing that in the B plot, I think would definitely be something. So good. Yeah. And Maria and Rhiannon are saying there will be some conversation in episode 1 about the siege, which I would expect, but,
yes,
but it's good to, but again, especially Fingolfin being the sort of the primary mover of, the one in charge, as it were, of the siege. I like bringing him in. I think that's going to be good. Okay, cool. Yeah. And then I know we were talking about episode 9, the dwarf story. We were debating about that last time. So where you guys are thinking is that we want to establish that, so like nobody can expect the dwarves to come in and fight during the battle, during the Dagor Bragollach, like they will eventually later on in the Near Ninth, but they're not going to now. And what I like about that is I like how that can be played as basically a thwarting of Aradhel's hopes, right? Like we can see it helps to emphasize. So we've already had her being locked up essentially in Nan Elmoth in episode 7. So establishing that this whole relationship that she was establishing with Eol is not panning out the way that she had wanted, and she's not able to do what she was hoping to do. And so, I mean, I think it would be kind of fun to play that B plot in episode 9 as a kind of a what if, right? Like we could see, like, conceivably, if Aradhel had been there, right? If Aradhel had been able to do what she did, maybe she could have convinced them, right? Maybe that story would be different. But as it is, they're not gonna, they're not gonna go for it. So
if Eol wasn't such a misanthrope.
Exactly. Yeah. Whoop. Oh, sorry. Accidentally scrolled through the entire thing there. Okay. All right. So that's good. Yeah. Excellent. The rest of it, I think, right. We've got the gap then between 9 and 10. Right, so, which is primarily the Gondolin story, secondarily the double wedding, and Barahir taking over. Right, so we're sort of starting with the next generation rose, kind of the last generation, right before the battle, and Fingolfin's warning. Yeah, no, I like that. Yeah, exactly. As Marie was reminding me, you can see the years down the side. So there's a 24-year gap between episode 9 and episode 10 there. Yes, I like that. And the gaps elsewhere are not that huge. Looks like the biggest gap we get is between 3 and 4. We got a 20-year gap there between episode 3 and episode 4. But that's good. That's good. I think that because we want to have time has elapsed for Eol and Aradhel, right? We kind of culminate their courtship, and then we're like, 20 years later, let's check in and see how that marriage is going, right? So that makes some good sense. It's the beginning of the Sauron plot, so that, starts after that little gap. The Stockade battle introduces the second, having established firmly the House of Beor in those first 3 episodes, we move on. So that's going to be almost the only place where that gap will even be visible, will be, immediately visible in episode 4 will be in the Eol and Aradhel plot, where it will be perfectly apt, where it will be very appropriate. So that's good. Elsewhere, looks like we get 10 years between 7 and 8. But that's after the council, right? So again, that sounds good, right? After the council and before the move of the House of Baor. I like that a lot. Yeah. Oh, the pacing is good. I think that this is all very nice. We get young Mygwin, right? Good. Young Mygwin, but then he can be more grown up when we meet him again in episode 8. That's nice. That's nice. And then between 10 and 9, we have a gap there. Okay. Little gap. 9 years. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. That's fine. Good. Yeah. I think that's excellent pacing. Okay. So let's talk about the Dagor Bragollach. So walk me through the big picture outline. We've got some visuals here to help out with that. Walk me through the shape of the battle as you're proposing it here.
Okay. So basically what we have is knowing that the battle was going to take place over 2 episodes, mm-hmm. the question then becomes mostly where to cut that.
Right.
And
right.
So in order to basically cut it in such a way so that it's a to be continued mm-hmm. kind of plot,
yes,
rather than to have 2 separate individual episodes. If you were going to have 2 separate individual episodes, then possibly the best place to cut it would be before the Fingolfin and Morgoth's duel. Mm-hmm. But that means that you have this duel taking place over an entire episode, and that just seemed
it's like a very uneven split. Yeah.
So having it cut in the middle so that there were certain plots that were unresolved, so that we have the audience coming into the action right where they left off, essentially, mm-hmm. Gives us the ability to do that. So what we start out with is the conflict is starting out in Dorthonion.
Right.
This is where we're going to have the first impact of glaurung on the settlements of the elves and on the men at Ladros. We're going to have a couple of major deaths, which is, we're telling the audience anybody could die in this battle.
Yeah.
Right. When we were discussing this, I brought up like Avengers Infinity War.
Right.
Spoiler alert. A few major characters die very quickly.
Yes.
And a couple of other major, seemingly invulnerable characters are defeated very quickly.
Right.
Signaling to you that this is not going to go well.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a really good model. It's a really good illustration of sort of sending that kind of message. I agree.
Right. And the idea that Dorthonion could hold out all the way into later parts of the episode, so that that Angrod and Agnor's death could be more climactic. It doesn't work. There's no way they'd be able to hold out that long.
Yeah.
Especially if they're the initial contact point. So while that's happening, the armies are also splitting off to the sides. Okay. So one of their biggest threats, as was evidenced by the Dagor Bragollach, is the Feanorians. Mm-hmm. So they have to deal with that. They have to keep them busy. Right. Another major threat is obviously Fingolfin, who is able to come through the mountains via Barad Ethel.
Right.
So what they do is they punch through at the Pass of Aglon. That's the defeat of the.
Right, hang on a second. I have your maps. Hang on a second. I'm forgetting the maps.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Let me bring up the maps here. Okay.
Ooh.
Here we go. So this is
number 1.
This is map number 1.
This is the initial locations. This is where everybody is at during the opening salvo. So I know the key is at the bottom. It's going to be impossible to show this whole thing in one shot and still have it be legible. But there you have the 2. You have obviously Fingolfin's at Mithrim. Having Fingon at Barad Ethel so that there's like a named person there that's in charge. When we get there, seemed like a good move there. The House of Hador is out on the plains.
Out on the plains, right.
Right. Directly below them, you have Agnor and Angrod over on the mountains there. All the way on the other side of Dorthonion, you have the House of Beor, Barahir in Ladros. You have the array of the Sons of Feanor there. I could find nobody has ever, apparently, on the entire internet, made heraldry for each one of the Sons of Feanor, which I find extremely odd. So I just took the heraldry for Feanor and numbered them.
Yes.
And of course, you have Finrod at Nargothrond.
Right.
So that's where all the pieces are set. So in the very next one, which should be on the next page, that would be where things are essentially in Act 2. Okay. So by Act 2, not a ton has changed. Fingolfin and possibly Finrod will probably have received word by this point that something's happening. Maedhros will have received word that something's happening, and Barahir will have withdrawn from Ladros. An interesting thing that occurred to me as I was putting this together is that the House of Beor essentially has to evacuate behind the lines of the elves as they pass.
Yes.
Which means that when Angrod and Agnor die, we should take advantage of this situation and show that they cannot withdraw, because if they withdraw, it leaves these refugees, including Andreth, open to attack.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, and if we can find a moment where it seems where we can even connect Andreth and Agnor together one last time, in some way, I feel like that will be really, really powerful and make their, like, yes, I want the shock value of their deaths. I think that's great, but having it also be for a reason. There's a reason why they can't get away.
Absolutely. You're right that the whole kind of tactical situation really suggests that. And I think that's excellent. I mean, I think it's just a wonderful opportunity, even apart from the like double extra bonus of Agnor essentially sacrificing his life to save Andreth and her people. Like, that's just like sugarcoating, right? The idea of having both Angrod and Agnor say, we can't withdraw, right? We can't withdraw or else and so the way in which, and of course the beautiful symmetry of how Barahir is going to save Finrod, right? And so the whole kind of ripple effect of this, we're not, obviously one risk, right, is that we suggest by this that, basically the Edain are kind of a net loss, right? I mean, they're kind of, weighing down the Elvish cause here by, if it hadn't been for them, Angrod and Agnor could have withdrawn and could have lived to fight another day. But again, the fact that we're going to have the kind of turnaround in Barahir having been saved is then going to save Finrod is going to, that's going to balance nicely. So,
another thing that's happening here, which isn't extremely obvious unless you have just seen the other image, is that in here, Curufin and Celegorm have moved up past the Pass of Aglon.
Right.
So what we've established thus far is that Celegorm is essentially their cavalry,
right?
The heavy cavalry guy for the Feanorians. So it makes sense that Maedhros would send him and Curufin up north to flank the mountains there, east of Ladros, to prevent Morgoth's armies from spilling out over on this flank.
Right.
One thing that we talked about that we can talk more about this another time as well, is that this may be where the innovation of Warg Riders appears, because what better to help counteract Celegorm's heavy cavalry than
Yes.
Morgoth deploying heavy cavalry of his own.
Right. Right.
You know,
Right. Which would certainly be unexpected.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, Celegorm, it's Celegorm and Curufin here, right? So
Right.
this is a move that it makes sense from Maedhros' perspective. Like he's got a, but also I can easily imagine Curufin and Celegorm essentially saying, okay, look, Dorthonian's gone, right? Like, you know, they don't have a high opinion of Angrod and Agnor as captains compared to themselves, right? They think that the Finarfinians are a little on the useless side and the men more so, right? So they're going to be looking out, you know, like around the corner there, right? And be saying, yeah, okay, that we're not even going to go, right? We're going to like, let's just try to, we'll keep, because if they can sort of funnel the army of Morgoth into the hills, they can delay them, right? You know, it's the only danger to the Sons of Feanor is if they come around the corner there from Dorthonion. So essentially them kind of, rather than coming in and trying to attack the flank and come to the relief of the people of Dorthonion, they can kind of
They want to keep Morgoth going this way.
Right. Down into Dorthonion, which is a kind of a dead end, right, as far as his armies are concerned.
Yeah, because they're going to end up at Arad Gorgoroth. They're going to end up in Dungartheb. As far as they know, nothing's been able to penetrate the Girdle of Melian, so that there's nowhere to go there.
Right. Exactly. So that's definitely the safest place for them to try to funnel them, as long as they're willing to sacrifice everybody who lives in Dorthonion, which Celegorm and Curufin kind of would be ready to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
And like another thing about this, and you know, people could ask, well, why haven't the other Sons of Feanor ridden to war here? Maedhros did not make all these fortresses for no reason whatsoever.
Yes.
Right? It's one thing to utilize your heavy cavalry for what it's for, right, and get them out on the field. But if you've built all these fortresses, you want to use them.
And advancing like your infantry out in front of all of your fortresses would be almost like having light archers who jump over a row of heavy infantry while a charge is coming, right? It would be almost like that. Yeah,
instead of like shooting over them like a normal rational person would expect.
No, agreed. I mean, it makes all kinds of tactical sense. I mean, unless they thought they could, unless they thought Morgoth was really not going to come that way at all, and they needed to move in order, like they did in the Dagor Bragollach, as you say, right? They moved in order to come to the relief there.
And one thing that's going to come out in Fingolfin's big push when he talks to Maedhros is Maedhros has run the numbers. Like he's got a pretty good handle on what Morgoth is capable of fielding as far as army size.
Yeah.
So he knows immediately that this is not going to go the same way as the Dagor Bragollach.
Exactly.
Maybe his brothers still think that's what it's going to be, but he knows that's not how it's going to go down. He
knows they're going to have plenty to do in time at their strongholds, and that they, the most important thing is that they hold those. If their armies get trapped out in the field, then their strongholds can get overwhelmed. No, it makes all kinds of sense. But again, I can see there's some really great opportunity, right? Both for showing the differences between the points of view of, say Curufin and Celegorm, but also of, Maedhros and his people, right? There will certainly be some people who will say, isn't it time for us to, pony up and go rescue folks like we did before in the Dagor Bragollach, right? This is the time for that, right? And have Maedhros be like, no, this is not even started yet.
We'll have plenty to do soon.
Yeah, we're going to have our hands full over here. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's going to start happening in the next act of that episode.
Right, so let me go back to the Gantt chart here for a second, just to kind of track here. So we've got in the first two acts, right? We've got Dorthonian's gone.
By the end of the second act, Dorthonion will be toast.
Okay, and we've got Celegorm and Curufin getting defeated at that same time as Dorthonion is finishing. Okay, so they're going to be driven back from the field as the army does in fact come around.
Right. So basically, they're going to make contact in that Act 2. They're going to get very quickly overwhelmed. Act 3, we're going to have them back through the pass of Aglon.
Right. So they'll have retreated
and have
down,
that pass. Right, and that pass will get taken at that point.
Okay. Quick question. There are a couple individual pieces on the enemy side, right, that we need to know.
Right.
Where's Glaurung? Where's Gothmog?
Yeah. So I really, because I knew that there was a lot of discussion still surrounding that.
Yeah.
I didn't want to mess with it too much as far as who was where, because ultimately it doesn't matter as far as the structure of the battle is concerned.
Right.
But what I would say is that in these initial 2 acts, right, Glaurung is in Dorthonion, and then he goes over to Maglor's the Gap of Maglor for the latter half of the battle.
Okay. So Glaurung is rampaging around Dorthonion. The Balrogs. I mean, we're killing named characters, so we got to have Balrogs there, right? So we have Balrogs taking the field and killing Angrod and Ignor, or do we get like one each? Does Glaurung kill one and the Balrog kills another one, or?
I mean, I'd be fine with that. The idea is mostly to have Glaurung around for shock value.
Yeah.
Having him engage in a one-on-one fight with an elf may not be a good use of his time, but that doesn't mean that we can't do that.
I just want to make sure that we don't. It's just in thinking about the flow of the battle and the nature of the story, right? I want to be thinking about Glaurung's, because this is Glaurung has had his reveal, but this is what Glaurung was supposed to be saved for, right? This is Glaurung
his shining moment
in his full glory. So I want to I'm thinking like the kind of effect that Glaurung should have, right? And I see what you mean about the one-on-one fight with an elf lord, right? He's like the artillery, right? I mean, he's like the siege equipment.
Yes, he's a siege weapon,
essentially.
Yeah. The way I've been thinking about Glaurung on the battlefield is essentially like close air support.
Right.
Essentially. Right. He's very, like, as a matter of fact, the text describes him as running out in front of the fires. Thank you to Rhiannon for reminding me of that a while ago. But the fire is going faster than Balrogs.
Yeah. Right.
So he's out ahead of all of that.
Yes.
So he's essentially, at least at speed, he's the fastest thing on the field.
Yes.
So having him just blasting through fortifications and lines of men both is just like, that's really his main job.
Yeah. I mean, I think establishing Glaurung as essentially something which it's like no one person could realistically hope to defeat, right? You know, this is not a, like, it would take a real hero to, like, no, it's like, it's not even possible. Like, you know,
Turing gets off on a technicality. He caught him unawares. It's not
right. And that's why Turing does that, right? I mean, again, that should be clear. That should be clear and consistent. And I like the flow of how this works out with the Feanorians too. We'll come back to that in a second. Okay, so Glaurung is plowing, and he's burning Dorthonion to the ground. The Balrogs are coming in behind him, right? So Glaurung Gothmog is there. So the force that comes around and first engage with Celegorm and Curufin, that's where if we do the Warg cavalry thing, right? Because so again, Maedhros has sent them out. Right. And Maedhros has sent them out because they're the cavalry, and that's what you do. They're sort of doing a cavalry screen thing. But they're expecting, Celegorm and Curufin are expecting to be able to hold out there. They're going to be surprised, to be like, something surprising has to happen in order for them to be overwhelmed. So I like the idea of the new innovation, right? The other innovation that he's done, which is, and especially since with who on there? Right, kind of fun to have the Warg cavalry come in, right, with who on there. So unfortunately, Huan is only one dog, right? So, anyway, so the War Cavalry comes in, and they're forced to, Kelgorm and Curufin are forced to retreat before that advance. And then we'll get glaurung a little bit later. Okay. And so meanwhile, now what's going on? We've just got them, the House of Hador, the guys from Hador have retreated from the plane.
So basically they fled from the plane of Argallan because it's, hot. And so they're going to be coming in kind of beat up, and they're going to encounter Fingon there at Barad Ethel.
Right.
How much time we're going to spend on that, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Again, my main concern was to figure out where everybody needed to be and what battle encounters needed to be happening.
Right. Right. So. Okay. Good. No, that's good. I like it. Okay. So, but they're holding their Fingolfin was still inland, right, at Mithrim when it began.
Right. So at this point, him and Finrod will be mobilizing their troops to get ready to move to the front.
Right. Right. Okay. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And Amros is still in his yurt down here.
Yep.
Not too far.
He does have a role to play, but
right. Yeah. We'll I like that. Okay, and Caranthir, you've got Caranthir. So Caranthir, Maglor, and Mithros are the ones who are forming the line, right?
Right. So essentially, just to have Caranthir on screen so that he's not, so that we're not just bringing him in when we get to keep Helivorn. Somebody, I forget exactly whom on the boards, asked, well, why is he caught at his fortress, which is kind of back behind the lines? Why isn't he? Why hasn't he marched to the front? But I realized that if he does march to the front, his army is going to get destroyed. We don't want that to happen quite yet. So having him already be there by Maglor when this takes place kind of solves that issue, where he's able to be there and be on screen.
Right. So he's basically visiting Maglor at the time.
Right.
So he's going to be like, well, I was going to say he's going to be grumpy, but he always is, right? But anyway, he's going to be grumpy that he doesn't have his army, right? His army is back at Helivorn. And okay. Yeah. All right. That's good. Okay. Did you want to, should I go to the next one?
Yeah, I would go to the next one. Yeah.
All right. I'll go to the next one. Okay.
So this is essentially Act 3. This is when it starts getting messy. You also notice there are 2 banners that are just not there anymore.
Right. Right.
So one thing that I do want to bring up is that while the civilians of the House of Baor are probably traveling through the pass that runs south of that'll take them south of Gondolin.
Right, the Pass of Anach, right down there into Dimbar. Yeah.
Yep. Barra here and presumably the bulk of his soldiers are going to be doing their best to cover their retreat while remaining hidden in the hills up north of Gondolin. So
north of Gondolin. Okay.
Right. So they're not making it overt that they're still there, but they're mostly there to kind of bounce the armies of orcs away from that general area. Okay. And just them being there and keeping orcs busy in that area will keep them from venturing further south. So they're
the 2 things that they would be wanting to do, I would think, right, would first to be to make sure they cover the retreat of the rest of the refugees. Obviously is going to be their first priority, but their secondary priority might be, I'm imagining even an act of faith, an act of Estel, on Barahir's part. Like if we hold, right, we find a place where we can hold, we will have an opportunity, right? He's not going to believe that all of the elf lords have just been completely swept away. I mean, they will see that Angrod and Ignor have. And so some of the people, right, some of the House of Baor are going to be like, everything is lost, everybody else is dead, let's just get the heck out of here, right? And Barahir would say, no, let's stay over here on the flank, let's hold this position, we can defend the pass to make sure that our families can escape. but also we will be prepared because something is going to happen, right? The other elf lords will come. In fact, it would be Finrod, right? He'd be like, Finrod is going to come. They know Finrod, right? They were, he was the one who was their patron, right, for so long. So they'll be like, Finrod is coming. We need to be here to support him when he gets here.
Right. He's going to be coming. He's going to be coming to aid his brothers, who are no longer there to help him. Exactly. So
exactly.
Also, Fingolfin by this point has made it to Barad Ethel. Essentially he's gonna get there and find Barad Ethel essentially besieged. Right. Now he has his full army at his back now, so he makes a sortie out onto Ardgallen, because if he can,
they're not just going to stay pinned up there in the north. They know that people need help.
Right. So if he can cut off the armies and cut off the flow of soldiers and supplies from Thangorodrim, that's gonna change the math, right?
Right.
What he doesn't really know is that their entire, like, everything that's facing him is really just there to stall him.
Right.
Like, he's not even their primary target, because Morgoth has absolutely no need to get into Hithlum.
Right.
Like, if they can get through the Pass of Aglon, Maglor's Gap, and the Pass of Sirion, that gets them into the soft underbelly of Beleriand.
Right.
And they can deal with Fingolfin after that.
Exactly. And so all they have to do is just try to separate Fingolfin from the rest. Yeah.
So he's going to be making a sortie down onto the field of Ardgallen in, I believe, in this act that we're here in Act 3. Yep, that's where that's going to start.
Yeah.
That by the end of
the route of Fingolfin is like the long defeat here, in these two episodes.
because it's by the end of this episode, by the end of episode 12, that offensive will have stalled.
Right.
Because all the soldiers that were involved in the attack on Dorthonion and everybody that was needed to punch through the Pass of Aglon, and most of the people who were involved in taking out Maglor's Gap, they're not needed down there anymore. And now there could be this big push to shove Fingolfin back up into his hole.
Yeah.
Up from Barad Ethel.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. I mean, because of course, like, the narrative shape that seems to be invited, like what it looks like might be doing there, right, is that, especially if we do Barahir first, right? We do Barahir and his, like, if we hold out, we'll be able to help. And then Fingolfin is like, let's charge down in that direction. So it looks like here comes the Elf Lords, right? Now things are going to turn around. And so if we have kind of the turning point of that come at the end of the episode, right? So that it looks like we're building up towards perhaps a dramatic victory by Fingolfin, or some kind of accomplishment there by Fingolfin, but then to instead have that frustrated and Barahir's hope not be realized in that episode, right? Because Finrod doesn't make it up until
the
episode 13.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's good. I like that, because of course he's the one who's furthest away anyhow. So tell me a little bit more now about while this is happening out here with the Feanorians.
Yep. So by this point, Curfin and Celegorm have been pushed back through the Pass of Aglon. They are, the fortifications there do not hold. Presumably there's some trolls involved in that.
Yeah.
But they're able to crack that pretty easily. In the far east, we have Maglor's Gap will be under attack by this point. And I think, by the end of the episode, that has been taken as well.
Okay.
So
Maglor's Gap falls.
Right. So the initial attack on it will take place in this episode as the Pass of Aglon is fully cracked through. And so by this point on this map, Maglor and Caranthir will be engaged. Now, how this happens isn't super important. but word has to reach Amras that something is going on. He's kind of out there on the plains all alone, so either he decides on his own, hey, Caranthir's got this neat fortress that I've been to, maybe I take my people over there where they'll be safe, or he gets word from Caranthir, from Mythos, hey, Caranthir's not at Keep Hellborn, maybe go over there to kind of supervise things, because there's nobody, like none of us are there to kind of handle that situation.
Right.
So, but by now he has started moving, and he will have reached the River Gellion by about now. We don't necessarily have to show that, but that's where he's at.
Right. Okay. So my thought when we were talking about Gothmog and Glaurung, we've done a lot of building up of the fortresses of the Feanorians, right?
Right.
I think it would be kind of fun to have it look initially, right, like they might hold. Like, the Pass of Aguilon gets forced, but the rest of the line looks like it's going to hold. Have Glaurung loop around and be the deciding factor that takes Magor's Gap. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
So that it's, because Kelgrim and Curafin, I would think, because again, they're the cavalry, right? So yes, they will have retreated. Yes, the enemy will have forced the Path of Aguilon, but that's not like a disaster, right? They still have the cavalry can still take it back fairly easily. They're still mobile, right? They're not in retreat. I mean, they're not like routing in disarray, right? They've been forced to retreat. They can regroup and charge back through. Right.
Presumably, Kelgorm's own army is in that area, and they're kind of covering.
Right.
Like more slowly pulling back to kind of cover the cavalry to make sure that they don't get enveloped.
So I would think, like, from the Feanorian perspective, it would be like, okay, some unexpected things happen. This isn't going really well, but this is recoverable, right? We can still deal with this situation. And then Glaurung comes in and blows up Magor's Gap, and that's when things then really get dodgy. Yeah,
and that would be in the final act of episode 12, so that would be perfect for that to happen at that point.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So that comes in
where we are here.
Yeah. Right. In this last one. So now, so the gap has been forced. Glaurung just burst through there. Curafin and Kelgorm are now still in retreat down here because now they've got word that the enemy's coming around behind them too. So now what do they do?
So now they have to act as like the rear guard, essentially. So they're moving into a position.
If they engage the forces on the west there, the others can come around and get clamp them from behind. So they've got to withdraw further and be more careful. Yeah. Right.
Whereas like they're not concerned that the people coming in through the Pass of Aguilon are going to they don't care. Either they don't care or they're not worried that they're going to get into Doriath.
Right. Yeah. No, exactly. Both. Both at the same time.
All of the above, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Meanwhile, Caranthir has headed back to Keep Hellborn, probably with a small cadre of loyal, devoted followers, right? Because people are super devoted to Caranthir. Maglor has turned to move towards Himring.
Right. Okay. So he's retreating towards Mythos.
Yeah.
So we've got Maglor and Mythos on this like island of defense still standing at Himring, with now the armies of Morgoth flowing down around both sides. Okay.
So in the west.
And this is and that's where we're coming. So the turning point of Fingolfin's charge happens at the end of the episode. And the breaking of the gap is happening at the same time there, right?
And presumably the assault on Himring has begun in earnest at this point.
Right.
There was an open question of whether or not to have Glaurung move on Himring, and I'm pretty steadfastly against that.
Me too.
Because Himring's not going to fall.
Yes.
And it's not a good look for Glaurung. Even if he like momentarily shows up and is like, I have better things to do.
Right. Sorry, I got somewhere I got to be. Yeah, yeah, no,
Right,
yeah,
which may be in the back of his mind, like he may be aware of Himring and just be like, yeah, I'm not going to waste my time on that.
yeah, yeah.
But showing that does two things. One, it reduces glaurung, right? Glaurung loses cool points.
Yep.
Also, if Himring isn't facing it, like if we minimize the assault on Himring, it reduces the impact of that. If we say Himring was never a focus of this attack,
right?
Then
no, I mean
we lose them.
Yeah, I don't want to lose coolness points for Maedhros either. You know, him being the one who has held and the. But I agree. I don't want to bring the irresistible force up against the immovable object there.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, nothing good can happen if we do that. Besides which, Glaurung can be everywhere at once. I mean, he's accomplished what he wanted there. And in a sense, right, you could say the same thing about Maedhros in Himring as we're saying about Fingolfin in Hithlum, right? I mean, who cares? You don't need to take Himling. You've got the passes around both sides, you know, so...
Well, so I'll give you a little bit of pushback on that.
Okay.
The reason why you build castles is because obviously castles don't cover the entire landscape that you don't want people to come through, right? But the reason why you build castles is because people can't control the land around the castle against you without having you hemmed in the castle. Right. So unless they can commit a large enough force to besiege you, because you have people in the castle that you could come out at any time and get them from the back. So, so at some point they will have to deal with Himring.
Oh, sure. No, at some point
they're trying to deal with it now. It's just what I would say is if we want Glaurung to destroy a full-on fortress, I mean, keep Hellevorn is right there, and it's
that's just what I was going to suggest. Yeah, and we had Glaurung. That's the zip code we had Glaurung in anyway. So I absolutely agree. That's just what I was thinking. No, when I was saying he doesn't really need to take Himring, what I mean is if the goal of this exercise, right, of the Dagor Bragollach is to break the siege and get the orc armies into, as you say, the soft underbelly of Beleriand, he's accomplished that. Without taking Himring, he's still accomplished that. There are now the routes that they can get in, and
Well, not taking Himring does have consequences. The book says that that Maedhros is able to retake the Pass of Aglon and reestablish it. Like he's able to reestablish their end of the siege very quickly.
Exactly.
Which doesn't happen on the other side. In fact, they actually lose ground on the other side.
Right. Yep. No, exactly. That's just what Rhiannon was saying, that when Maedhros retakes Aglon, you sort of see why taking Himring would have been a good objective for Morgoth. Absolutely.
But it doesn't happen. So in the west, real quick here, we see Fingolfin, Fingin, and presumably Galdor there. This is where their forward momentum is stalled. They reach a point where they're part of the way out across Ardgallan, and they can't continue. So the next two acts will see them kind of backed up into a kind of a defensive posture, and then finally back into Barad Ethel where they came from. So things being close to each other is usually code for they're in the same place, but Finrod is not, in fact, in the same place as Barahir there.
Separated by a significant mountain range there. Yes.
So Barahir still hiding out in the hills and making sure that the Pass of Anak remains clear, while waiting, hopefully impatiently, for Finrod and or Fingolfin to arrive. Finrod at this point will have arrived at Minas Tirith. And will be, let's see, this is Act 4, so he is engaging at this point with the armies that again are just there to keep that gap stopped. They're not even particularly they're not ready to take Minas Tirith this time. Like they saw how that went last time.
Right.
They're not ready. They're not prepared to do that at this point, but they definitely need to have that gap stopped. Orodreth is still at Minas Tirith because he has like a small garrison that's there to hold the keep, but he doesn't have a full out army that he can take out onto the field,
Right.
which is what Finrod brings along.
Right. And it makes, I mean, tactically, it would seem to make sense for Morgoth's armies because the way that things have gone, right? Essentially, they can force the elves to take the offensive against them on the field. They don't have to attack the fortresses, not those fortresses in the west. Right. If all they do, if the elves decide to stay and man the defenses, they can just wait until they've handled everything else and then gather all their forces and attack them at their leisure later on. Right. So Finrod and Orodreth, right, they would all see, they're not going to do anything. They're like we have to attack them. We have no, unless we're going to do nothing at all, right? Unless we're just going to let everybody else die.
Right.
The only way that we can contribute, so it's just manning the walls of Minas Tirith isn't going to get it done.
Right. So, so that gets us to the break between the two episodes. So at this point,
right.
The armies of Nargothrond have engaged with this kind of delaying force. But keep in mind that while that's happening, Fingolfin's force has stalled, so there's already a critical mass on the field of Argallan at this point.
Right.
Where they can't, where we know, based on that information, that their attack isn't going to...
Finrod is going to know? Finrod is going to know that Fingolfin is fighting on the field in the north?
No, we know.
We know.
That's what I'm saying.
Right. But I'm wondering, should they know, should they be thinking, because the urgency, right? Like, we've got to go to, if we can come in and force our way through here and attack the flank, then, we can combine with Fingolfin.
So there's the potential for a back channel of communication going on along the back of Eredwethrin.
Right.
Where they can be getting information to Minas Tirith. So when Finrod gets to Minas Tirith, there's no reason to think that he can't find out at that point that Fingolfin has taken the field.
Right.
That they're engaged in an offensive on Ardgallan. He doesn't have to know how it's going.
The status, right? Exactly.
But there's no reason he can't have at least know that that's happened.
It would certainly lend urgency to their having to attack. So the army. So Florian is saying that he feels like Minas Tirith should be besieged. I agree, not attacked, but besieged. Right. So basically, the orcs would come in, and then they would dig in to the north of Minas Tirith. Right. Basically, just daring them to, because so they're blocking the pass defensively. Right. And then, and Orodreth, as Florian also points out, he's also a healer. He's not going to be leading the charge anyway. So,
but I want to make sure that it's not just that he's
a wimp.
There's legitimate tactical reasons to not go out there.
Absolutely.
Himring by this point is absolutely under assault.
Right, it's an island.
Right. So it's under frontal assault. They haven't gotten to the point where they can come around from behind on them yet. When that happens, it will truly be very bad.
Right.
But basically, what I would say is that as far as the attack on Himring, at this point, it's ominous, but not it's like everything is okay. Like, they haven't broken anything significant yet.
It's not desperate.
One would imagine. Right. I don't know if you recall the kind of hilltop that you guys had picked out
for Himring,
the location of Himring, right?
Yeah.
So one would assume there's a keep up on top of that.
Yes.
That's the Star Fort.
Star Fort.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And there's probably one or more outer curtains that are involved in that fortification. None of that has been breached at this point. The fact that the assault has begun is not a good look. The audience knows that the Pass of Agalon has been forced, and by now they know that the gap of
Maglor's gap.
Maglor has also been forced.
Yeah.
So they know that Mythos is going to be encircled relatively soon.
But we've also, despite what the rate at which named characters were dying at the beginning of the episode might have led us to suspect things would go even worse than they are, right? Yeah. I mean, after those first 2 deaths, all of the Sons of Fëanor are still around, right? There have been defeats, but they're all still around. Yeah. Fingolfin has bogged down, but again, there's not been like a miserable defeat of his armies. They've just not been able to move forward.
So essentially, what we're looking at here is an very unresolved state,
right? As
far as the progress of the battle goes,
right.
Things have not gone well, though.
No, they have not gone well. But before the end of I'm looking here at the Nargothrondrim, which is a word I always have a hard time saying, spanning the 2 episodes there. What happens? Does Finrod comes up and he learns about what's happening, and so surely, in the 4th act of episode 12, we're doing the we must attack. Fingolfin's on the field, we've got, and Ordreth being like, it's a trap. That's just what they want us to do, obviously, and Finrod being all like, I don't care. Are they going to attack before the end of the episode, do you think?
Well, yeah, I would say that Finrod has to take the field. We have to, because he's got to get separated.
Right.
So he has to take the field. What I would say is that by the end of episode 12, he's driving headlong into what he can see are not very good odds at all.
Okay. So him setting out, basically, right? Him setting out to attack. And Orodreth saying lots of ominous things. Right. Him setting out despite...
One would presume that from the Tower of Guard, he's had a pretty good view of what's going on out there.
Absolutely.
Even without information coming back even without a whole lot of information getting back to them, he's got to know that Darthonian's fallen. It's not... There's a lot of very not great things that he knows about at this point.
Absolutely. So that'd be cool so I'm thinking about the end of the episode, right? The end of the episode 12, we've got, we see Himring coming under assault. And so it's, and we've seen everything else falling. So it looks like things are going badly, right? We've got, what's his name? Glaurung bursts through Magor's Gap, right? So we got the destruction of Magor's Gap, right? Things on fire. We've got Fingolfin stalling, right? And there's got some kind of conversation, somebody saying this, we can't, there's no way, it's not possible. We cannot force our way through this throng here. We were hoping to reach a breaking point, to break through by now. We've not done it. We're not going to do so. The realization that they can't succeed happens. So Fingolfin's despair with a lowercase d, right, happens there at the end of episode 12. Again, the breaking of Magor's Gap, the beginning of the assault on Himring, which looks really bad, and then Finrod putting on his helmet and saying, Orodreth being like, don't do it. It's gonna it's a trap. And Finrod being like, we must, and putting on his helmet and preparing to go out with all signs pointing towards disaster, basically. So we don't, okay. And then we save the actual disaster for the beginning of the next episode. So that would be, that would be good. Okay. Yeah. Cool. Now, meanwhile, what's Barry here up to? Do we have anything from Barry here? Is he just waiting still?
So I would say that we're not seeing Barry here very much. I would say that we should see Barry here, what he's doing, at least up in the hills there. But we're not gonna spend a lot of time with him because we kind of want the audience to not be thinking about him. Right.
We will have left him hoping, looking like he's almost hoping for rescue, right? Essentially, the Elf Lords will come. And we'll be here to help, but in the meanwhile, let's just ford up and wait, and then we leave them. Yeah. Fair enough.
All right.
Okay, cool.
We're ready to go on to 13?
Yeah, 13.
Okay. So
let me actually start with the Gantt chart here. Right. Okay, so we've got the assault on Himring is heating up right in the first act. But we're still going to be the kind of, tell me the difference between Act 1 and Act 2 as far as the assault on Himmling is concerned.
Okay, so the Act 2 is we're going to have to repel this assault. It's going to have to reach the point where the army has backed off far enough from Himmling that they're not an immediate threat.
Right.
We're definitely gonna deal with those guys in the next season, but they're at this point they're not a threat to Himmling itself.
Okay.
In the first act there of episode 13, I feel like we have to start breaching some of the defenses.
Yes.
Like we have to have orcs in the outer wards of.
All the arrows seem to be pointing in this direction, right? Aguan has fallen, Maglor falls. Yeah. It's inevitable, right? Maedhros is going to fall too, and the whole thing is going to crumble. That should be where we're building in Act 1, right? It's got to be looking bad.
Yeah. So how we're going to resolve that, I have some thoughts on, but Maedhros could utilize the sudden appearance of Maglor, not that Maglor comes and relieves Himmling or anything like that, but Maedhros is able to use it to his advantage or something like that. But something which, and keep in mind that the majority of the forces involved are now faced up against Fingolfin on the other side. Right. So, so having them throw back this assault, possibly destroy the siege engines that are involved in trying to take Himmling. There's 100 different ways that can go, but basically, Act 1 we're talking about a ramping up of the tensions as far as the assault on Himmling goes, whereas in Act 2 we're going to have the resolution of that, which as people who have been long time adherents to this project will know, doesn't sound a lot like me to want to wrap up tensions halfway through an episode, but I have a good reason for this, and we'll get to all that.
Yeah, definitely.
Also, during this time, we have the taking of Keep Hellvorn. We're going to have Curufin Caranthir arriving there at Keep Hellvorn. If we have Glaurung there, it's not going to go great for him. So we basically had Caranthir exit pursued by a dragon at the at the end of episode 12.
Yes. Right. Okay. Right.
And only to exit again, pursued by dragon again.
Right.
Yeah. By this point, the way that the things are described, the orcs pretty much have the run of that plain between the River Gellion and Doriath. I'm really just putting Celegorm and Curufin out of the way at this point because they're no longer combatants in this situation. They're unable to do anything particularly helpful, and I want to make sure that I establish that they're not coming to help Maedhros. Right. Meanwhile, on the other side,
why? By the way,
no?
Why? No. I'm not objecting. I'm just saying
basically
they've got to have a reason.
Well, their reason is that the plane's completely overrun.
Okay.
That's why they can't punch through.
And they are unwilling to try to pull a Fingolfin and charge across like he's been charging across Ardgallen. Curufin's going to be like, yeah, no, there's no point.
As far as they know, Himmling's already taken.
Right.
They have no reason to believe that they
will have seen the orcs coming down the other side. They will know that the ones who have come through Maglor's Gap. So they'll know. So yes, if they assume that the entire line has been broken, that would be understandable.
Yeah, they're not merely being cowardly and self-serving.
That's what I want to. I mean, yes, self-serving, absolutely, but there has to be a reason. We don't want them just to be like, oh, I didn't feel like fighting anymore, so we just left. That doesn't hold together. So,
Amras is still on his way to keep Hellevorn, and isn't he gonna in for a surprise when he gets there?
And finds a dragon. Yes.
And finds a dragon. Yeah,
Yes.
that's the worst thing to find when you're hoping for refuge.
Yes. Yes. So this doesn't look like so as quite a secure a spot as I was hoping for.
Yeah. Yeah. On the other side of things, Fingolfin is now in full retreat.
Yeah.
From Ardgallan. Now the full weight of Morgoth's armies are starting to hit him. So and he's not at this point they probably have found some sort of defensive posture that they can take, but they're not going to be able to hold.
Right.
Also, in the south, a very, very similar situation where what's the name? Finrod is basically like kind of playing stopgap at this point, because now he just wants to keep these orcs from counterattacking and pushing through the pass of Syrian. What I'm thinking about how he gets separated is possibly that he sees an opening along the mountains, which is of course a trap, right. And he decides to try to flank he personally leads a charge to flank the orcs on that side and maybe reach Fingolfin that way. But that's how he winds being personally cut off in the Fens of Sarek there.
I mean, I think basically even just kind of like sort of generic heroic action.
Or maybe on the other side, actually. Now
actually, on the other side would be better, I think. So he has two motivations to burst through, right? He's trying to burst because he wants to get to Fingolfin, but he also wants to try to check on the House of Baelor.
See what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and also,
and his brothers.
What about his brothers? He doesn't really know what happened to them. So
exactly. So
because it's very possible that whole defensive line up there was slaughtered to a man. We don't especially if they were acting as to cover the escape of the humans.
Yes, exactly. So he doesn't know what's happened there. So he is going to feel the desperate need to push through. So I kind of, I think that especially since there's some distance between between Minas Tirith and the Fens of Sarek, right? I mean, so he's gonna make some progress. So he's gonna break through. The orcs will have thrown. They will have dug in, right? They will have made some initial defenses. He'll succeed in breaking through there, and push up to the north, and can even look like he's gonna accomplish something, right?
Well, during the Dagor Bragollach, the orcs actually had a whole line of earthworks along the north side of the Fens of Sarek. Like that, and which probably still exists. That's it. They may have converted. The elves may have converted it, so it's kind of facing mostly the other way.
Right.
But the idea that his little effort there would get stalled in that area makes perfect sense, because we've already established that as kind of a defensive point there.
Right. Okay. So he's charging up, and he's gonna get. So his separation, there are two difficulties with his separation from his troops. First is exactly why, how exactly, he can be.
So he has to be leading from the front.
He has to be leading from the front, right? And we can have some kind of. Who's he fighting? Just orcs? Is there anybody? What's Gothmog up to?
That's a perfectly legitimate place for a Balrog to be. We are probably going to have established some named Nargothrond characters by this point, who we could kill somebody off by then.
Well, I'm thinking like Finrod's separation from everybody else has to involve he's not going to be like alone, right? I mean, he's not just. Right. It would have to be him in advance with a group, all of whom get killed, basically, except for him.
Well, do they all have to get killed though?
Well, not all to a man necessarily, but
that's what I'm saying. If he's down to him and a few bodyguards holding off,
that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
Exactly. But yeah. Now Rhiannon reminds us that Gwyndor's brother needs to get captured.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where that's going to happen.
Yeah, that's perfectly.
So Gwyndor's brother, whom I guess I'd heard rumors of renaming Gwyndor's brother. I don't know. Anyway, there was talk about that. Well, whatever. Gwilyn, isn't it? Gwilyn and Gwyndor? Anyway, whatever. Gwyndor's brother can be one of Fingolfin's, or not Finrod's captains, and be with him here, and get his capture can be part of this. Oh right, Gelmir. Right, there are two Gelmirs. Okay, right, got it. Right, Gelmir, got it. Okay, anyway, so we've already got Glaurung way out at Hellevorn, right? So he's completely on the opposite theater. So we can't have a Glaurung sighting here. Problem with Balrogs is what's Barahir going to do about that? right? I mean,
well, yeah. So here's what I think would happen there. So the Balrogs don't necessarily have to know that Finrod's right there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if they're mostly dealing with his army and defeating his army,
right?
And like they're not on the scene when Barahir shows up.
Okay.
And the amount of people that is cutting up what's left of Finrod's like inner circle of guards and whatnot is not able to hold up against Barahir.
Right.
And then all Barahir has to do is kind of sneak Finrod back through the hills so that he can get, back behind his own lines.
Would it be if the intervention of Barahir and his men was able to save? So the suggestion that, who was making the suggestion? Florian was suggesting if what happens, basically he's suggesting what happens if it's not a question of Finrod being actually separate, like himself personally separated from his whole army. What if his whole advance army that he's been pushing through is surrounded by orcs, right? There's, as he points out, plenty of orcs to do this, right? So basically it comes to a point where Finrod is like, and now we're toast, right? We can make a good fight of it, but eventually we're all going to die here, right? And that's when Barahir, so what Barahir does is basically break the ring surrounding Fin and enable the remnant of his whole army to escape. That still counts as rescuing Finrod, right, even if it's not him isolated personally, right, from everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, tactically that's sound. I would not be opposed to finding a way to preserve the
sort of one-on-one
story.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That I feel like is optimal, but
yeah.
I would consider that version to be an acceptable fallback position.
Right. Or even, I mean, there's some kind of combination. I mean, if Finrod alone escapes and all of his army is killed, that would be unfortunate. Right?
It would be terrible.
We need to save some of the not the Gondolindrim, some of the Nargothrondrim to die later. Like this is not the day when Nargothrond gets wiped out. So so I mean that's one of the factors, I think. And again, it's hard to see how he's going to be separated that completely from his whole army, so that his army, like, why does nobody from his army able to come rescue him?
The only thing that I have any concerns about is the fact that if his entire army is encircled in the Fens of Sarek, that's essentially the exact same position that they were in the Dagor Bragollach, and I feel like Finrod, while he's not the tactical genius of the group,
might possibly have learned that lesson.
Into the same trap twice. So there's that. It doesn't even have to be the Fens of Sarek. Like, we can find another place for this to happen in that kind of corridor there. it's nothing in the world, and I think that we'll be able to definitely figure something out.
Though, if we do though have it happen in the, what I like about that is that then the last stand of the men of Dorloman in the Fens of Serek, like that's the third battle in the Fens of Serek, right? So for this to happen, and basically be like, great, the bloody Fens of Serek again, and the men of Dorloman
Literally.
saying, yeah, no, we'll stand here. So like the Fens of Serek are always associated with, disaster and slaughter, and so that basically the Fens of Serek in the end are commemorated by the by the Hill of the Slain, right? So that's sort of the final, not symbol of, but kind of landmark of the Fens of Serek. So yeah, I kind of like that. Okay. Yeah. Now, Florian is saying, of course, the difference with the parallel to the Dagor Aglareb is that this time, instead of the Feanorians coming out of Dorthonion to rescue them, more orcs come out of Dorthonion to surround them, right? So it looks like, because you could say, Nick, that he's falling into the same tactical trap that he fell into the last time, or you could say, it looks like it's going in the same direction it did last time, right?
Actually, you know what? If the orcs' defensive line is at the Fens of Serek at the beginning, and like we can just hang a lampshade on that in order to conceal. Look, we just went through this. Like this just happened.
Right.
Maybe we don't fall into the same exact. And Finrod is like, "What do you want me to do?"
Exactly. Yes. We can't not attack. Like just as we've got to even at the risk. And then even hey, like it turned out last time. I like that. I like that actually. And then of course we do get the Barahir coming down out of the hills behind the orcs who come out of the hills. So, Yeah. No, Florian, I really like that idea of, the sort of anti-parallel of the Dagor Aglareb, right? Instead of the Feanorians coming down to save the day, you have, we still have, what's his face? We still have Bulldog, right? We could have Bulldog here. Yeah. What if it's Bulldog? Bulldog is a nice kind of expendable, expendable villain, expendable not in the sense that we need to kill him off, but in the sense of like he's not a complete juggernaut. Like he's a significant force, but he's not undefeatable.
The Balrogs can kill Galdor's brother.
Yeah, exactly. We can have the Balrogs up in the north. Yeah, they're going to be up with Fingolfin.
If the Balrogs show up, and that's part of what drives Fingolfin back. Retreat.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. So we have the Balrogs focused up in the north. Rhiannon points out that Bulldog was the one in command in the Dagor Aglareb, so this would be his revenge, right? Battle of the Fens of Serek Part 2, this time when Bulldog wins, right? Right, and we've got Gondor, Galdor's brother, dying up there, so he can be, we can feed him to the Balrog in the north.
The sacrificial,
absolutely,
Balrog rule lamb. Yeah,
exactly. No problem. Okay, good. Yeah, no, I like that. And
they've already killed named characters in this battle, so like the fact that they're killing a relatively minor character.
No, it's just gravy at this point. They've already killed Angrod and Ignor, so that's fine. And what was I going to say? Oh yeah, Gelmir, Gwyndor's brother, right? Bulldog can take him because Bulldog is going to survive this battle. He's not dying yet.
Grab him by the head and drag him off. That'll be
sure, right. Yeah. Look, we can make that look fairly horrible right in front of Gwyndor, right? Gwindor's right there, and absolutely. Okay, sure. I like that. And then, so Finrod should be involved in some kind of heroic action, right? When he's, so I agree. I do think it would be nice to have the coming of Bara here be both a kind of enabling him to withdraw his army. Because again, we need to save Nargothrond elves to die later. But also personally rescuing Fingolfin. Bulldog can be like Gelmir or Gwilyn or whatever we're going to name him, or rename him. He can, he can be there with Fingolfin. Like his being taken can be right at, near the climax of when it looks like, Finrod himself is going to be taken next. And that can be when Barahir comes in. So Barahir doesn't come in time to prevent that. But okay, that works. Meanwhile, we've got we're back. I'm going to go back to the Gantt chart here. So
basically, what would happen there is that we will get no action for the defeat of the Nargothrond.
Yes. It is a really hard word to say, isn't it?
Yeah. In episode 12, we'll just have the lead up to that.
Yes, we lead up to it. Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
The ominous Finrod decision to attack is what the culmination there.
So episode 3 will open with, not necessarily open with that, but it'll be in the opening act, and basically the stuff that's the rescue of Finrod then just moves down to be on the same line with that, because it's essentially the same event now.
Right. Right. Yeah. So we've got the initially successful, but then turning towards disastrous attack of Finrod, and then that turning point there. Yeah, sure.
Right. The gifting of the ring would happen in Act 3, and you notice there's nothing else happening there. Now, this is what I was alluding to earlier.
Right, because Act 2. So you're wrapping up the Eastern Front in Act 2.
Right. So basically, we're doing the same thing that we did with the entire season in episode 11 here. Okay. So what we're doing here is this is the deep breath before the plunge. Right. We get to check in with everybody involved. By this point, Keep Hellvorn has been taken. Amras has shown up at Keep Hellvorn,
only to find the dragon there.
Finding the dragon there. Caranthir escaping through a postern door or something like that, and Amroth, does the whole, follow me if you want to live kind of routine, and
yes,
they're going to escape to Amun-Arab eventually.
Yeah.
The assault on Himring has been repulsed. Fingolfin is in Barad Ethel. The soldiers of Nargothrond have essentially retreated to Minas Tirith, so there's kind of a state of equilibrium across the entire front at this point. Right.
That's this map, right?
Right.
More or less.
Right.
Okay.
So, again, this is the deep breath before the plunge. This is where we kind of count our dead.
Yeah.
Reestablish that this is the way it is. This is the battle is over.
Right. The new normal has begun. Yes.
Right. They're not going to. There's not going to be a last minute takedown of the armies of Morgoth.
Yes. The realization that the battle is over and the good guys lost. There's not going to be a last second. Right. Like happened in the Dagor Bragollach. There's no one's riding in to save anybody. This is the smoking ruin of Northern Beleriand.
Right. So this is where Fingolfin is going to have his final conversation with Fingin, which is going to pay off a fantastic thing that came out of episode 2 that nice. I can't wait to talk to you about.
Good. Yeah. Look forward to that.
Oh yeah. I'm so happy. I was so worried about episode 2. I'm still a little worried about a few things, but I'm much happier than I was. This is going to set up Fingolfin's despair and rage. This is a critical part of the Fae attitude that cannot be overstated. It's not merely his despair that overcomes him. Right. It's also kind of this anger that builds up in him. In addition to all the other groundwork that we're laying that's leading up to this.
Yeah.
But he has had it up to here with this guy.
And his desperate resolution to try to still accomplish the plan solo.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. This is where also we should be doing our best to get some of the bad guys back up into the Thangorgrim area.
Yeah.
We definitely want Sauron to be able to witness what's happening there, wherever he's at during the battle. We definitely want to make sure that he's back in Thangorgrim for this moment.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Having Gothmog available to be present and witness this also it would be kind of great too, because this is literally going to attack his confidence in his single-minded only thing that he really believes in.
Right.
This is going to attack that.
Right.
Which is going to pay dividends when we get to the Fall of Gondolin, because his entire everything that he's about is just going to fall apart.
Right
there.
Right.
Even though Gondolin is taken, he's not going to make it.
Right.
Killed by a lousy elf of all things,
with no arms. Yes.
Yeah. Helmet. Yeah. I still don't know how that's going to work, but sure.
It'd be awesome. It's going to be awesome. Come on, there is no better death that anyone in the history of Tolkien's fiction dies than Ecthelion of the Fountain in the Book of Lost Tales, Fall of Gondolin. It is the best thing ever. Ever. Just ever. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Speaking of awesome deaths, so a lot of Act 4 is gonna wind up getting. So we're gonna have obviously the approach to Thangorgrim, right, in the opening of Act 4, where Fingolfin rides out across Ardgallen and nobody wants to go anywhere near him, and this is a point which I think that it's okay to kind of show his onset in a way that the slow and creeping flame is not, because we're going to be able to kind of call on the stuff that we've built up from Orome back in in season 1, and use a lot of that same imagery that we saw at the War to Begin All Wars, as he rides across the plain, because we're not going to see a whole lot. It's going to be so bright and so elemental in a way that we're not going to really be aware of how much space he's eating up. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So yes, he's riding, 100 miles and change.
It's okay.
over the space of a minute and a half on
Absolutely.
Screen time.
Absolutely.
It's fine.
Gotta have it. Gotta have it.
One thing, and I cannot believe that I didn't realize this before, about the seven wounds that he lays on Morgoth. It's super unspecific as to how that happens. Like, I've had in my brain this whole time the wound that he delivers to his foot, but we can pull off some superhero level, minor superhero level.
Yep. Totally.
Like Captain America level.
Captain America level is perfect. Yes.
Right.
Agreed.
Stuff where he's where he's going to do things that have the audience going, I mean, maybe,
Right. Exactly. Yeah, no, absolutely. Morgoth. Interesting. So I was just, last night, I was doing, my penultimate class on Morgoth's Ring, and I was discussing one of the 2 essays near the end in Myths Transformed in Morgoth's Ring, when Tolkien talks most about Morgoth and what was going on with Morgoth at this time. And at that point, I think shows a shift from some of Tolkien's earlier thinking. At that point, he compares the size, when he talks about the duel with Fingolfin, he compares Morgoth's size to an ogre. So, like ogre Morgoth, he calls him. in other words, it's not like Morgoth doesn't have to be like 30 feet tall, you know, during the duel, such that Fingolfin can only reach his foot, right, in order to stab him. It would be fine to have him be twice as tall as Fingolfin, for instance. Which gives more scope for Captain America-esque levels of heroics, and you know, he can reach his vitals. You know,
Well, and of the feats of film Legolas, the fight with the troll in the first one seemed to me the most plausible.
Sure, that's not a high bar, but I hear you.
Right.
Yeah.
It's true that they hadn't quite figured out how to get the CGI right, so that, you know, like his legs look like an actual person's legs when he's running up the chain and stuff like that.
Right.
But that level of acrobatics, I feel, is totally acceptable for Fingolfin here.
Yes.
Like, I mean, sure, we don't want Yoda jumping around Count Dooku or anything like that. Like, that's too far.
Too far.
But,
agreed.
I think that we can definitely get, like, having him like vault off of Grond after it hits the ground and get a shot up in the shoulder or chest region on Morgoth. That seems totally plausible.
Totally plausible. Yeah, and we'll think about when we get to discussing that episode, we can think more in detail about the fight, because we'd want the 7 wounds. I mean, 7 wounds, right? There needs to be some like symbolic significance. Like there needs to, I mean, these can't just be random gashes, right? There needs to be some, you know, we need to be thoughtful about, because these are wounds that Morgoth is going to have for the rest of the time. Right. You know, so
it's also important to know that Morgoth doesn't touch him the entire time that's happening.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, no, it's there's a lot, I think, that can be done there to make that fight an interesting fight. With some real suspense in it. Especially if we're setting it up with the kind of the prophecy, you know, that Fingolfin had. Like there's other reason to think, like, holy cow, this really could be it, you know. No, that's excellent. I love it. I think the only foot shot should be at the end, you know, when he's pinned. You know, that's the foot shot. It makes Melkor limp for the rest of his life. Okay, great. I think that all seems to me to work really well. So tell me, where are we leaving Maedhros? We're leaving Maedhros. So Maedhros repels. So we have not a happy ending, but it's the only exchange that ends well.
Yes.
Apart from Barahir's rescue, right? That's a success. But that's the only victory is Maedhros' victory, basically.
Right. So the only people who come out of this looking particularly good are Barahir. And Baron's right here there with him. So you know,
Baron and Barahir. Yep.
Fingolfin, I feel like, is gonna, like, yes, he dies he dies, but he accomplishes things.
Yes,
he's heroic.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a moral victory.
Definitely.
And the and Maedhros' success at Himring is a victory as far as he's concerned.
Yeah.
But everybody else is not looking too good. You know, nobody else has succeeded at what they were doing.
Right. Exactly. That makes sense. And it's nice to have, you know, in some ways the victory or non-defeat at Himring is it's kind of, it does, you know, it breaks the uniformity, right? Not everybody loses, you know, it's not that it does sort of show this was a defeat, but not a complete collapse. You know, in other words, just as we've been thinking between last season and this, how do we create clear distinctions between the Dagor Agloreb and the Dagor Bragollach? You know, how do we establish the effects of those battles and how they. Similarly, we want to be thinking about the difference between the Dagor Bragollach and the Near Knife, right?
One thing I think I just thought of this, would be interesting is to have a moment between Maglor and Maedhros that mirrors the moment between Fingolfin and Maedhros at the kinslaying. So if you recall, the kinslaying, they were coming up opposite sides of the arch. They meet in the middle, and Fingolfin, like the weight of what's happened hits Fingolfin like a truck.
Right.
And Maedhros like reaches Fingolfin, and he's kind of expecting high fives all around.
Right.
But that's not what happens.
Right.
So having that happen between Maglor and Maedhros, where Maglor is excited because they won, and Maedhros is aware enough to know that if Himring almost fell, then things have gone horribly wrong. You know?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And even if as he's going to recover out there, but so what? Like when they were at full strength the first time, they didn't stop them, right?
Right.
What good is reestablishing the same lines under these totally new circumstances in which, especially once Minas Tirith falls, and so therefore the orcs can just come around the other side however they want. But that's a season 6 issue, obviously.
Yep,
but,
absolutely.
Okay, cool. Well, that works. I think that's really excellent. And we end Finrod. We end with Finrod and Barahir in the ring, right? That's the end of the Finrod.
So basically, I would say that we definitely want to set up the fact that Barahir has gone off with his guys to back up into the hills,
back into Dorthonion.
Finrod
would invite him back, right? Finrod would say, stay with me, and so Barahir. Why is Barahir going to go back?
Well, I would say that Barahir, first thing, like they've been there and done that as far as living in Nargothrond at this point, and that's not workable for them. Right. Also, there's probably a lot of his people that got separated. Like the flight of the refugees doesn't have to have been in like a neat and orderly thing, right? Oh, by the way, the encounter between Finrod and Andreth could either happen at the tail end of Act 3 or in Act 4, between the point where Fingolfin has reached Thangorodrim and Morgoth, and the fight proper actually starts. Yeah, I forgot to mention that before. Anyway, so having him out, having Barahir out on the hills, Finrod's probably stopping at Minas Tirith on his way through, but he's gonna well, actually, I guess he can't viably leave his retreat his entire army back and just leave Minas Tirith with a small garrison anymore.
That would not be a good plan. It would seem.
Yeah. But that's a season.
That's a season 6 problem. Yeah, we'll figure that out.
Yeah. Fingon and Galdor are there at Barad Ethel with what's left of their armies.
Yeah.
And Caranthir and Amras have retreated to Amon Arab, where they make contact with the Green Elves there. We don't have to explain a lot there, but like we've been there. We've seen the fortifications around the top of Amon Arab that Mablung set up hundreds of years ago. Right. So that's a defensible point from which they can then move forward and handle the Orcish incursion in the east there. Right. So,
okay. So 2 last Dagor Bragollach questions, then we'll just tie up a couple loose ends quick before we move on, before we end. First, one minor character whom I'd always kind of vaguely fantasized that we'd be able to do a little bit more with her story, but it's hard to find room in this, even though we're expanding so much. Baron's mom, right? Leading the refugees.
Emildir.
Emildir the Man-Hearted. Yeah, her. That, like, it gets a mention. Like, it's one of those things that gets like one sentence, which, when I read through this section, I'm like, oh, like, we should do something cool with that at film, but I don't know how, where, like there's no time to put that in. So anyway, so that's just one note. We don't have to resolve that now. I just want to kind of, as we're working through outlines and stuff, just to sort of throw that out. Something to show what Baron's mom accomplishes with the refugees would be cool. Right. Secondly, question, I think it was maybe Florian asked it much earlier on, Florian or Stephen, I'm not sure which, was asking, do the Haladin pitch in at any point? Do we get anything from the people of Halath? They just stay at home in Brethil?
Well, they've made it pretty clear that they're not interested in fighting alongside the elves. They're
the double wedding establishes them as connected to the others, right? So they're not going to be. It's not like they're going to not care what happens,
right? But I would say that it might just be an issue of focus versus big picture. They're focused on making sure that Brethil that the Farce of Brethil stay safe.
Yeah.
Rather than marching to help other people defend other lands that they've never seen before. I don't know whether or not we're going to have any time to address this. I feel like if we do address it, it'll be when we kind of backtrack to Hurin and Hur, because we're gonna see what was happening in Brethil at that time.
Right. Well, the one thing that occurs to me as at least a very plausible explanation for why the Haladin don't come up is communication. They're cut off, right? They're isolated. They don't get, so it's challenging enough to invent.
Finrod's going to pass right by them.
He's going to pass by them, but he's going to be in an awful hurry when he passes by them, right? So, I mean, that they're not really tracking with what's going on and don't keep up in time to be able to participate. I
mean, if they've kind of been tasked with keeping some of the younger people of other houses safe, like Hur and Hurin, for example, and if other people are coming to them, like they have a role that they're playing in the battle. They're not up at the front, and it's also important to note that they don't really have soldiers.
Right. They don't have an army exactly.
Right. They're hunters and woodsmen, and woe be to any orcs that are going to come anywhere near Brethil.
Right.
But acting out on the open field, it's not something that they're equipped or prepared to do. Like,
and Finrod himself could perceive that.
Right. And the House of Bayer has been preparing for that by this point.
For decades now,
the House of Hador is absolutely prepared to be out on the field.
Yep.
The House of Halath that's not their bag.
Yeah, exactly. No, that makes, and they're also the smallest too. I mean, there's not all that many of them. Certainly compared to the House of Hador. So, yeah. Okay. All right. No, that works for me. There could be even some sort of frustration, like the isolationist tendencies of the Haladin could manifest, not even in like unwillingness to go forth and fight, but even just like slowness to respond, right? They're not, let's leap up, jump into the saddle and ride off to rescue people is not what they do, right? So even,
and living in the woods, they don't exactly have like a thriving horse culture
exactly,
either. So,
right. Yeah. No.
They're not going to be able to get there anytime soon either way. And
again,
Finrod's
not going to wait for them. Finrod's not.
They probably don't have armor. Like not having armor is a huge deal.
Right.
If you don't have any armor, they're not going up to the battlefield to fight.
Yeah. No, that all makes sense, and it helps to establish that them. It sets up things for later, to make it clear sort of where they are and what their contributions are. So, okay, yeah, good. Ooh, Marie said Emildir could be responsible for bringing Narsil out of Dorthonion. Mm-hmm. We do need to get Narsil out of there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
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 So if when Barahir makes contact with Finrod and they have a conversation, it can be made clear that Barrier has sent scouts up into Dorthonion, up into where Aignor and Angrod were, and
Yes.
he can convey the news of Finrod's brother's deaths. And then so it's not that weird that they have Narsil.
Narsil, yeah.
Along with the other refugees, because it would have been handed off via those scouts.
Yeah.
So yeah.
We can figure out that way, but yeah, it's true. We do have to keep an eye on our heirlooms, make sure that the ones that escape need to escape. Besides, having both Narsil and the Ring of Barahir passing into the, sort of possession of the House of Beor here at one time is kind of nice, actually. That's
and if Andreth and Finrod are having their final conversation, and Emmelir comes up with Narsil and offers it to Finrod because it's his brother's sword, and then Finrod turns around and gives it to Andreth, I feel like that's a pretty powerful.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty
statement
cool.
as well.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. Cool. Excellent. So that's good. Well, let's just kind of closing the loop on a couple of these questions from last time. I had said pick an episode where Huon is doing something awesome in battle, and an elf we like can prophesy about him. And so the conclusion was the best place to include him in season 5 is season 4. I'm cool with that. We can retcon season 4. So good. Caligorm and Fingon are there before with Glaurung, right? They're while they're hunting for Glaurung.
Yeah, he's watching them from across a chasm. They're not aware that he's watching them, so that was one of the big concerns, at least for me, was the idea that this prophecy would be somehow overheard by enemy combatants while not engaged in combat. That's a problem.
Glaurung is a fun example of that, because then if Glaurung is basically the authority for this is not just like some random orc overheard it and spread a rumor, right? This is Glaurung would be able to state this with some authority when he returned. So okay, I like that, and I totally agree. Draugluin can be with the warg riding anti-cavalry, right, of Morgoth over there, driving them back. So an almost confrontation between Huon and Draugluin would be cool there, especially if we build it up, right? I mean, everybody knows Draugluin is the greatest wolf, right? He is the chief of all of the werewolves. We've known him for several seasons now. So if we have the prophecy about Huon and the greatest wolf who ever lived, that's obviously Draugluin, right? I mean, everyone's got to think it's got to be Draugluin, especially if we have them almost fight and it looks like, oh no, Huon's going to face the greatest wolf ever and he's going to die there in the battle, and then it doesn't happen, setting up, of course, their battle when now it looks like when they're fighting at the bridge, in season 6, now this is finally the time when Draugluin is going to kill him, and then he doesn't, right? So that's kind of fun. Oh, cool. Marie points out that with the audience not knowing yet that Glaurung can speak at all, the fact that he bears the tidings back to Morgoth is that's just kind of extra, right? That we can save that for later. I agree. Good, exactly, Florian. So if the prophecy comes up during the Bragollach, right, when Draugluin is there, there can be some reference to to remind people about the Huon prophecy, so that we kind of build the tension there. Love that. I think that's really great. Kieran stuff, right? That Beor's trip to the seaside was canceled. No seaside outing for him. But we have Kieran interacting with Finrod and Fingolfin. So is he going to come to Nargothrond then? Was that the idea? Kieran's going to visit Nargothrond instead of them going to him?
We have to at least once show Círdan in the context in which he actually exists. So
Right.
at least one of those conversations is going to happen by the sea. We had briefly talked about the possibility of maybe having Fingolfin talk to Círdan by the sea as he's preparing for his big push, because
Right.
that kind of tour, that campaign tour, can
Yeah.
very easily just take him from west to east across Beleriand and end at Himring.
Right.
So
Right. Okay. All right. Okay. So I see. So Marie says Finrod will visit Círdan, but just without Beor. Right.
Yeah.
All he has to do is just wait a few years. So he was planning to bring Beor, but Beor got like old and stuff and couldn't travel. So, it's hard. Okay. Good. And then, the dwarf story, we talked about that, something about how the dwarves do not feel the need to lend military aid to the Noldor beyond supplying weapons. This is not their war. They don't feel threatened by this war. But they are willing to give weapons because what they have is a trade relationship. Yep.
No dwarf stronghold has ever fallen to the forces of Morgoth.
Nope. No reason they should fear it, right? No reason they should fear it. Yeah, exactly. Okay, cool. Good. All right. So I'm going to stop there. So we're going to talk, we will get to the frame, but we'll talk about the frame next time, as I foreboded at the beginning of the episode. The one thing I will say, I did say I would say something about the frame. Here's the thing I'm going to say about the frame. There have been debates about the frame. The number one thing I would say to kind of help to guide continued discussions over the next 2 weeks as we continue to prepare for frame discussion, I am pro simple frame. I think that there is and when we were talking about this, I think we're feeling the temptation to elaborate that story, right? Bringing in, especially with the desire to bring in, younger Denethor and, everything else. Like there's a lot to like about involving that whole story, but that could really easily, become a whole season itself, right? And we don't, I think, want that. So I definitely do agree with those who were saying, Hakan was saying, I think, and Nick, I think you were arguing for this too. If we keep the frame really just focused on Gandalf interacting with a small number of people, so that we have that story be sufficiently limited really to serve as a frame. And it was the principle that we used way back at the beginning, having the frame primarily be just a handful of characters. It was really just young Aragorn and Elrond and Gilrain for season one.
Yep.
So I think that seems to me really good. I mean, the point is that it's Gandalf's attempt to do some good down there in the south. And so the primary emphasis is on both like the specific dynamics of Gandalf interacting with those people, but also the larger issue of like Gandalf, trying to oppose the enemy, down there in that territory. So,
up until now, the frame for last season has had the largest cast, but there were very distinct, like there were different races involved. You had humans and elves and dwarves, and it would be very clear who was who.
Yeah.
Whereas if we're dealing with an all human cast in a culture we have no familiarity with whatsoever, even if you've read the books.
Right. We have no idea. Yep.
Right.
Yeah. No, agreed. And though Rihanna points out it was almost all the characters from The Hobbit, right? Which was an advantage, of course, because they're known, right? I mean, it's whereas again here to be introducing an entire cast of thousands of people we don't know and will never meet again in a frame is hard. I think a very small cast and a fairly simple story, just Gandalf So I think not doing the Gondor thing, resisting that temptation. We still have time. We still have decades of chronology between this and the beginning of the War of the Ring. We still have many seasons of shows and frames between now. I think Gondor, Juvenile Faramir can have its chance, I'm totally picturing someday, I don't know where exactly, but a like young Boromir and Faramir frame, with like, with Mithrandir coming in and him and Boromir not getting along. And I get that feels like it should be a frame at some point, right? Dealing with the fairly recent death. The wizard's pupil's business. Yeah, exactly. That's there's, mostly building the relationship between, Gandalf and young Faramir. Totally should be a frame. I don't know which frame, but at some point we can totally do that. So the time will come. The time will come for that, but it is not yet. So anyway, we'll continue to work on that. We'll elaborate that story and think through the frame and how it fits with the shape of the whole season. That'll be our focus for next time. And then hopefully we'll be ready to talk about episode 1 after that. So we're looking at dates wise. We're looking at November 5th. Is our next episode at 10 p.m. We will not be discussing episode 1, but rather the frame. And then we'll be doing episode 1, presumably on the, whatever is 14 days after that, 19th of November, which I think is the week before Thanksgiving, right? Thanksgiving, I think, is the 26th. So, I think that's the week before Thanksgiving. Anyway, but there we go. So excellent. Rhiannon says episode 1 is almost ready. Fantastic. That'll be great. So we'll talk about that in 4 weeks, frame in 2 weeks, episode 1 in 4 weeks, and we're off and running and working through the details of our story for the season. Awesome. Nick, thank you for joining me tonight. That was really great. I really enjoyed digging into the Dagor Bragollach there. I think that this is a really cool shape. It really helps to make sense of things and really fits with our stories. I think that's going to be pretty awesome. So thanks for that and for all the work that you did thinking through and preparing that. Thanks everybody for your suggestions on the discussion board, and look forward to continuing to work with your suggestions and see how we can resolve the frame and then onwards into the story. And you guys are still doing, where are you guys in the script outline discussions now?
So we're going to be doing episode 3.
Okay.
It will be 2 weeks from this past Sunday, as far as I know, and
Right. Okay.
unless something very strange happens that I'm
Right.
unaware of.
Right.
So that would be, it looks like the 1st
November
of
1st.
November.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
that's right.
That makes sense. November 1st. So November 1st at what, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time?
8:30 p.m.
Right.
Eastern
November
time.
1st at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. You can join in on the Twitch channel, twitch.tv/SignumU, if you want to. And you guys are going to be discussing episode 3 at that point?
We're going to be doing episode 3. Yep.
Fantastic.
So we're going to have a good time.
Cool.
And hopefully shorter again than the last 2 discussions, which I thought episode 2 would be shorter, but it was not. And so, yeah, hopefully.
Okay. All right. Okay. Oh, wait. Marie says actually you're going to be talking about the frame.
Oh, yeah. Because we have to fill in the frame stuff from the past.
Right.
And I guess that makes sense if we've,
Yeah. Okay.
if you guys have another couple of weeks to go before you're going to talk about episode 1 anyway. So, yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay, cool. Great. Excellent. Anyway, so that'll be on the 1st of November, and then we'll be ready for another episode, another session here of the podcast on the 5th of November. Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for joining us as usual. And I will say, as always, thanks for listening and Godspeed. Although the theoretical budget of our hypothetical blockbuster may be unlimited, the production budgets of this and the rest of our fun alternative educational projects are unfortunately not. If you have enjoyed joining our production team, please consider donating at signumuniversity.org/fund.